Now, we'll be looking at the national grid collapse, where we'll be giving an analysis on the frequent incidents and impact on the economy. Nigerians, were on Wednesday plunged into darkness for the 12th time following another grid collapse. Let's not forget, it's probably we had 2 in 1 month. Within 1 week in October, the grid collapsed 3 times in October alone, within 1 week, with its attendance blackout sparking reactions from Nigerians. Now, a tweet via the official handle of Nigeria's national grid confirmed that the collapse at about 2:09 p.m. happened on Wednesday. Now, this collapse makes it a historic 12 times in a year that the grid has collapsed. What is the way forward? Which way are we heading? What is the solution? What are we missing? Is the privatization working? What could be done differently? These are all questions on the lips of Nigerians. How bad is this for our economy? What image is this giving of Nigeria to the public space? What lessons can Nigeria learn from other African countries who have somehow found a way to figure it out? To dissect these issues, we have in the studio, Olabode Sowunmi, CEO, Capture Limited, and Chairman, Energy Transition Study Group, NGA. It's good to have you in the studio this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. What's your thought on, let's just open the conversation start. What's your thought on the power sector in Nigeria? What is missing? What's happening?
Okay. At the root of the issues of the power sector is money. Finances. So the power sector, when you compare it with the sister sector, which is the oil and gas sector, is a very, very poor cousin. And it is that for a number of reasons. First is the illiquidity in the system, and which can be traced to what is known technically as the ATC and C losses. So the ATC and C losses means A for aggregate technical collection and commercial losses. Technical collection, commercial losses. Technical losses means the infrastructure is in such a way that there are losses in the system in the process of generating, transmitting, and getting to the customer. There are losses there. Somebody bears that loss. In the commercial losses, which is in the structure, in the way the thing is cost, maybe it's not cost effective. And as a result, when the balance of it, somebody also needs to bear the loss. Then there is the collection losses, which means that even the power that is transmitted, it is not all of it that people pay because of those who are smart, quote and unquote, and all that. And that's an important lesson, because when you see somebody who bypasses the meter and people say he's smart, it's not really smart. It's actually harming the system. So it's a system. So it's like your digestive system. If you have a problem in your stomach, no matter how sweet the food is tasting in the mouth, there's going to be a problem somewhere else. So at the root of it is that it simply means that when you look at the cost of generation, cost of transmission, and all these additional costs there, the cost to which it gets to the customer is lower than all these costs together. So that makes the system to struggle. That's why the system is always looking for bailouts. Then there's another very key important factor, which had to do with the way the privatization took place. When the privatization took place, for some reason, the foreign people that came were not so happy, and there were a number of issues. But what now happened was that when those that got the privatization licenses were not able to bring in foreign funds. So if you compare with the privatization within the telco space, MTN brought in billions. Econet then, as they were known, brought in billions. Adenuga too brought in money from outside. In the case of the power sector, that was not the case. All the money came in from local banks. And our local banks are not traditionally used to funding businesses, talk less of infrastructure. Because globally, infrastructure cost is usually the one with the lowest interest rates. So typically, you want to borrow money for a road. They will give you $10 billion at maybe 1% or 2% interest rate across 30 years. That's how it is done anyway. This infrastructure, so whether it is transmission infrastructure. So what the people that bought the discos now did was that they went to our banks, and those ones borrowed it to them at 35%. So that's why you will see that the banks are taking over a lot of the discos. because there was just no way. Because what now happened was that they were excited with the turnover of those discos, not realizing that all the money that came into the disco does not belong to the disco. It belongs to the industry itself. So the disco probably owns like 40%, a percentage goes to the generation company, a percentage goes to the transmission company, and all the things that you have in between. So they got a lot of their mathematics or arithmetic or accounting wrong, and they were moving from one issue to the other. And then when you combine it with capitalistic greed, where people just wanted to make money and all that. So the issues in the power sector are multifactorial, and it's not something that one action can solve. You know, Nigerians tend to look for a kind of messiah thing that, okay, let's just do this, everything will work.
Yeah, before we get to the solution, how bad is this for Nigeria? Especially seeing that this is the most we've had a grid collapse, and with the way it's going, it is most likely going to be more. How bad is it for the nation? How bad is this for our economy?
No, this is not the most we've had grid collapse. It's just the most that attention has been thrown to.
Yes.
I think during the Jonathan era stroke, we had twice as much grid collapse. The only difference is that some of those grid collapse appeared like just normal power failure. So it is people at the center that know whether it's actually grid collapse. And what really is grid collapse? A grid collapse is actually a safety net to stop the total grid from getting destroyed. So it's like you have a fuse in a device, so that when the current goes above a certain threshold, which is high current, or it goes below a certain set threshold, rather than destroying the appliance, the thing switches off. So
more like a circuit breaker.
Yes, but basically a fuse. So it is the same principle that is responsible for the grid collapse. So there's a governor which is at the distribution center. So when the demand flow is above a certain threshold, it collapses. When it be below a certain threshold, it collapses. And then the engineers need to come into place and all that and adapt it. So it's not the kind of disaster that is being made, that it is being painted as. It's not really that. You know, people just need to see it. So in other words, if a certain disco is faced with a certain customer or certain area where they feel these people don't pay, and they decide to cut them off, which does happen, and it happens and for whatever reason, this is just hypothetical, it happens in Kano, it happens in Lagos, it happens in Benin, it happens in Enugu, it happens in just together, you will see that the load that will come on the grid will be higher than normal because it's not being transmitted. In which case, once it goes beyond a certain threshold, the grid will collapse.
All right. So how bad is it for our economy? Especially we're looking at, they're talking about manufacturing. Let us start boosting manufacturing in Nigeria, agriculture. You know, how bad is this what is the impact of this on our economy and even, household and businesses in general?
Well, economic impact is obvious. I mean, there's repeated studies that have shown a direct correlation between the power produced or the increase in power produced in any nation and the increase in productivity, increase in GDP and related. And it's not hard to look. I mean, look at the average small business. We're talking about the barber, we're talking about the woman doing the grinding machine and all that. All those people invariably have to use some kind of generation. Either they do it directly from the grid or they buy what you call I better pass my neighbor. Now, the barber who is cutting his hair at so and so price using the generator, he probably will have a much better business if he got regular supply at a constant rate. If you check the fast food across board, whether it's Mr. Biggs and all the other ones, 40 to 50% of the operational cost is related to power. So because, I'm not sure how many people will go and eat in a restaurant if the food is not hot. I mean, even if it's light, let's say they're using water, if the food is not hot. And because we're in the tropics, where microbes can grow readily, the food must be hot, otherwise microbes can grow in the food. And what will happen is that you have food poisoning. If you go to a place twice and you have food poisoning, I am rest assuring you are not likely to go. But that's just your own protective measure. But that also means a business is dying. So the person doing the business is obligated to put all those things there as fundamentals for the business to survive. All those things cost money. So if we're able to put in power as it is, for example, for a food business, what that means is that you are increasing their profitability. I think it was Highland Tea, those people that they're in the Adamawa high regions, when they did a power, I can't remember the exact details, but their power supply changed, either because they were started to produce or they got some special concession from the disco, one of the two. As soon as they did that, their operational cost fell by more than 40%. And for the first time, they started making profit just by one single factor. So there are a lot of businesses that you can look at, even companies, even if you are running a consulting firm, which is, you must have light. I mean, are you going to meet a consultant where they need to put in candle in daylight? I mean, so there are certain things, there's so many things that power does. Even for our children in school, how are they able to read in the night? I mean, they are schooling for a university student where they are trained in the terms of mental rigors to actually develop their capacity to read and all that. They school during the day, they read at night, in the evenings, and they wake up in the night to read. It's a regimentation that they want. So how are they going to be a civilized society if there's no light to read? In fact, how are we going to be a civilized society if there are no light in our hospitals, if the doctor needs to use torchlight to perform an operation? So the power sector is directly proportional to development, is directly proportional to increase in GDP, is even directly proportional to our ability to be called a civilized nation.
That's dangerous. So at this point, what is the way forward? Most people have said that privatization is not working. Most people are saying they should reduce over-reliance on the grid. So many people have come up with different school of thoughts. But I'd love to hear yours. You said it's not a magic word movement.
No, it's not.
What is that solution that could give short-term, long-term, middle-term?
You see this talk whether privatization is working or privatization is not working. It's neither here nor there. Privatization is a vehicle. Government ownership is a vehicle. Private ownership is a vehicle. So it's like saying that, okay, we're going to Wagwalada, and one person is using machine, and the other person is using a Rolls Royce, and the other person is using Toyota Corolla, and they say no, because he's riding on a bike, he won't get to Gwagwalada. It's not true. You understand? They are all vehicles of conveyance. The bigger issue are the factors of governance, and one of which, like I said, is the liquidity and the way the privatization was done. But after that, a number of things have also taken place with government interventions and all that. But that has also led to corrupt. There have been issues, allegedly, of corruption within the system. You get which calls for the operator the regulator, in this case, to have greater eyes on it. There's also the fact that, just like with petrol, there's a cost issue. There's also the fact that, just like with the oil and gas industry, where there's a lot of people who go to break into pipelines and all that, every single person who steals power is contributing to our inability not to have power. So, and I keep telling people that somebody intervenes the system and all that and steals from the system, somebody is going to bear that cost. The cost will not disappear simply because somebody stole electricity. The disco will bear it, the transmission company will bear it, the generation company will bear it, in addition to all the other issues. So we need to also realize as a people, because our own attitude, our own culture, our own perspectives is part of the problem. We need to realize as a people that your neighbor, your friend, who who is involved in energy theft is part of our problem. And it's part of the things that can be done to solve the problem. There's also, there are multiple issues that we can start to look into. But the point I'm trying to say is that it is not one problem. It is not one issue. It is not like if you remove privatization and government pays some trillions to all those, because those people paid and they're going to pay them back, and they paid in US dollars. So, and they're going to pay back in US dollars. So if they do all of that and they're able to, and they'll pay with profits. So if they're able to reach an agreement, hypothetically they're able to reach an agreement, and they empty the treasury and they pay them and all that, they're still going to have to run the place. To run the place, you're going to put money. And when you put in money, you're still going to sell to people. And if the same people are still stealing and are still inefficient, so privatization has its issues, no doubt. But we need to know what we're trying to solve, so that we don't, because once it is privatized, there are people to benefit. Once it is not privatized, there are people to benefit. So we don't allow people who have ulterior motives to hoodwink us to taking decisions that are extraordinarily expensive and extraordinarily inefficient.
So at this point, what is the feasibility of having stable power supply in Nigeria? Is it doable? Is it possible at this point in time?
It's possible, and it will ultimately happen. But what I'm saying is that it's going to involve us doing all the right things together, consistently, for a while. So it is not like it's an action that you do for 1 week, suddenly everything works well. No, we didn't get to this stage overnight. We got here owing to decades of neglect, decades of poor attitude to things. So we're still going to have to continue doing the right things. And we must do all the right things together and be consistent at it to reach a threshold. South Africa had the same issues for like almost 3 years when we were having blackout. But now, in South Africa, I think for 9 months, there has not been blackout again.
What are they doing that we're not looking up to? What lessons can we pick from there?
So the factors for theirs is not the same thing as the factors for ours.
Okay.
So it's like you have two women who are having problem with childbirth. The fact that it's a problem with childbirth does not mean it's the same problems.
Sure.
There can be multiple issues. So the factors for theirs were not the same factors. For example, they don't have the issues of energy theft like we have. That's for starters. Their grid is in a more stable, more robust ways. They have smart. There are many factors where they have advantages. They have nuclear, which they use for power. One of the big differences with nuclear and the other energy sources is that nuclear can produce like 100 times what hydro energy source can produce, even though it has its issues in terms of. So there is no developed nation that doesn't have nuclear as a source for producing electricity, because you can have a lot of it coming in from hydro and all that, but in terms of what is needed for robust industries and all that, you need like what you do, what 10 hydro or even 50 hydro stations can do, one nuclear plant will do. South Africa does use nuclear to produce power. So they are, in terms of what they are able to generate.
So is Nigeria not capable of having that?
Yes, we are, but politically, we are not even agreed. So there are institutions for that. There's the Nigerian Nuclear Regulatory Authority, which is supposed to do some things. But every day when they bring it up, it becomes a debate, and people will know little about it. Start to talk, which is another Nigerian issue.
Misinformation.
Because the humility to say I'm not an expert in an area that I'm not an expert is usually missing. And with that, people hinder those who should actually do things based on certain logic. So what now happens is that people use logic to combat knowledge. And I'll give you an example. So water is a liquid. Virtually every liquid in the world, when they become solid, they reduce in size, except in the case of water. But that's why when you put water in the freezer in a glass cylinder, it breaks. It's called the anomalous expansion of water. That's scientifically. Now, if you are not an expert in that area and you have not been familiar with water as a different kind of liquid, and a chemist was talking and say water expands when it freezes, you say no. It doesn't make sense. No. So you are speaking from a point of logic that no, every liquid must reduce in size. This is common sense. And this guy is saying that no, there is this. So that's usually what happens in Nigeria.
Okay.
People who are not experts, because they hold on to a perspective of logic from listening to CNN and from reading different blogs, they now start hindering those who are experts by polluting the discussion in the public space.
So at this point, what is the way forward when it comes to, we're running out of time, so let's touch a bit on the way forward on the part of Nigerians, on the part of the energy sector, on the part of, the government as well. What is the way forward?
The things that need to be done has been said in so many fora and all that, and I can just name a few. You get things need to be done in terms of energy theft. The transmission losses needs to be worked on, and that is investment in infrastructure. So from needing to build more transmission lines and all that, and the whole grid itself, either it is renewed or another grid is done, a heavy investment needs to go into transmission. A smart grid will be good, because if it is a smart grid that is done, it makes the ability to eliminate collection losses to be quick, because the telecom sector and the power sector have certain similarities, at least particularly in the area of transmission. And if you have a smart grid, the same software that you use for your phone when you make a call, that you are not able to steal or interrupt the billing system, can actually be used with a smart grid for collection, such that people will not be able to intercept the process and can have zero collection losses. But that is dependent on also another set of investment in that area.
All right.
Then our own attitude as a people, we need to be the ones calling out those who are stealing energy.
We'll be personal whistleblowers.
Yes, so that the system can work.
All right.
So we need to now be doing all of these things consistently for a while before the changes start to appear.
All right, thank you so much. It's always a very, very informative and eye-opening segment with you. I love the fact that you called everybody out, but that's fine.
Everybody is responsible.
Everybody is responsible. I will try to do better as Nigerians. It was so good to have you with us in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
If you're just joining us, well, we're having a conversation with Olabode Sowunmi, who is the CEO of Capture Limited and Chairman Energy Transition Group, Study Group. NGA. We're talking about the electricity sector and everything that concerns it. I hope you've been able to pick something from this conversation.